His lawyer needs to tell him to get on with his life. But his lawyer's still getting paid. Yeah, his lawyer's getting paid. I'd rather not get paid than do that to somebody.
Yep, I agree. Okay, looks like we're on. Call the meeting of the Morgantown Planning Commission to order. Does anyone want me to read the 3 meeting announcements?
No, sir.
Good deal. Any general public comments for matters that are not on the agenda? Okay, there's no unfinished business. New business is consideration and approval of the comprehensive plan for City of Morgantown, Morgantown 2033.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Staff request tonight that the Planning Commission approve the comprehensive plan update Morgantown 2033 and recommends that the plan to Morgantown City Council for consideration adoption in accordance with West Virginia State Code 8A3-7. Before I turn our time over for a presentation from our team from Roadside and Harwell, just wanted to thank you all for your time. This is the 4th meeting that we're having here to discuss the comprehensive plan update. Also want to thank members of the steering committee, of which some of you participated in, that helped kind of kick things off and started identifying early on some trends and issues that we needed to address. Also wanted to thank everybody who is either listening online tonight or anybody that's in the audience for their participation. I think we had really good community input throughout the process, both in person and virtually. And we were kind of challenged at the beginning when we started because we were kind of at the end of towards the pandemic. So there were some challenges related to that. So appreciate everybody's patience and all the good work that Roadside and Harwell has done for us. Before I turn it over, I'd also like to just make note for the record that we did receive 3 comments via email in the last few days regarding the comp plan update. Those are included on the dais in front of you and will be included as an addendum in the final report of this plan. And that a copy of the presentation that Roadside and Harwell is going to give is also on your dais. So with that, and for the sake of time, I will turn over to Ron and Dina to walk us through the plan.
Hello and good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you for having us with you today. We're certainly excited to provide you with an update to where we are in the comprehensive planning process. I echo Ricky's remarks in saying thank you to all of you and the citizens of Morgantown in providing input throughout this process that certainly has led to a plan that will set the stage for the future of the city. Just for the record, my name is Ron Sessoms. I'm an urban designer and planner with Roadside and Harwell, and I've served as the project manager for this effort, and I'm joined tonight by
Dina Roadside. I'm one of the principals of Roadside and Harwell, and I'm also a planner.
And joining us virtually is Eden Merrick, who has been an instrumental planner on the process. And you met her at previous meetings and at the public meeting, so not sure if I think she's on mute right now, but she's with us virtually.
Circle.
So with that, we can get into the presentation. You go to the next slide, Ricky. So for the agenda tonight, we have about a 20-25 minute presentation. We want to walk through the vision of the plan, go through what we learned from public meeting number 2, which took place in early August, provide you with updates that we've made since the last time that we've met with you regarding the comprehensive plan, talk a little bit about implementation priorities, and then wrap things up with questions, discussion, or any thoughts that you have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dina.
Thanks, Ron. I'll start by talking a little bit about an overview of the comprehensive plan process and how we came to the recommendations. The first task was in developing a vision for the city and really understanding the things that people in this city value about the city and the things that they want to see changed, and to help establish a format and an understanding of the potentials for the next 20 years for the city of Morgantown. Next slide, please. We started by really recognizing the strengths of Morgantown, and we know it to be a city with many, many assets. When we first came to Morgantown, it became quite clear that arts and culture were a really strong backbone of the city. It was something that was very impressive, a program that was being passionately put forward, and that a lot of progress had been made. And you can see it throughout the city, which is really inspirational. But in addition to that, we quickly learned that people also value both the natural resources and all of the recreation resources in the city. And in fact, many people said that that's why they were attracted to coming to Morgantown, and why they stay in Morgantown is because of those assets. You also have a downtown that has very strong bones and has a huge amount of potential. And we think that that is something that is a great promise for Morgantown to recapture the greatness of the downtown. It goes without saying that people respect and admire and recognize the outstanding educational and medical facilities in Morgantown, and those certainly are attractors and assets to the city. But what often doesn't get recognized are the neighborhoods, how vital and diverse the neighborhoods are, and how important they are to the residents. This is really the Morgantown for so many people in this city. And the way they define their quality of life here, I think, starts with the way they feel about their neighborhoods. And so I think that's really essential. All of this understanding, yes, thank you, Ricky. All of this understanding has led to several central themes for this plan. The first theme is to protect the city's natural and built assets. I've already talked a bit about the river and the creeks and the open space, and so many people told us that these are the qualities and the assets that keep them in Morgantown, that have attracted them to the city as well. But people, as I was saying earlier, live in their neighborhoods, and so neighborhoods and housing are a tremendous asset and tremendously important, and people care passionately about what planning gets done in and around those neighborhoods. You have an extensive tree canopy. It's something that needs to be protected. It is being protected, but even more than that, it needs to be expanded over time. And we've heard a lot from people who are working very hard to expand the green qualities of Morgantown. And finally, it's a city where history is still evident and is respected and needs to be recognized and retained as well. Next. But the neighborhoods really serve as the backbone, but when you think of those neighborhoods, you think of single neighborhoods that have housing in them. And one of the things we looked at, and one of the themes of this comprehensive plan, is to establish complete neighborhoods. And by that, we mean neighborhoods that, through a mix of uses, allow people to live, work, and shop within 15 or 20-minute walk of their neighborhoods. And so in order to both identify as a complete neighborhood and also to fully recognize and feel like your neighborhood is satisfying your needs, it's important for us to start to think about these neighborhoods as more than just single uses. And so when we look at the opportunities then for a complete neighborhood in downtown, what does that mean? Does that mean adding residential to downtown? How can we start to get more activity on a 24/7 basis in the downtown area? It will be something that, when one tackles plan for the downtown, is something that will need to be addressed. In addition to that, you've already started to look at mixed use in your riverfront area. It's very successful, it's very beautiful, and it's something that I think will continue as the success of it grows. But what about your residential neighborhoods and also your corridors? There are opportunities as well for putting more commercial so that people can live and shop in the residential neighborhoods, but also looking at the corridors and looking at the largely commercial corridors and how can one start to diversify those and allow those to allow people to live in them as well as shop along them. And then finally, to explore appropriate locations for various development types and intensities, both in terms of locations and types of businesses and technology in various areas, looking at where high-intensity residential can appropriately be located, where medium-intensity residential and low-intensity residential can be located. Ron,
Thank you.
why don't I leave this?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. And then thinking about establishing complete communities, we started with the development of a growth framework, which looked at opportunities throughout the city of Morgantown for opportunities to improve land use and transportation connectivity. And you can see on the page here, there's a series of opportunities that we identified as part of that framework, which aim to strengthen key districts and neighborhoods throughout the city, preserve cultural and historic resources throughout the community, look to expanding open space and greenway opportunities throughout the city, thinking about the corridors, how one approached the city, improving walkability, bikeability, etc. So you can see on this map here, we identified a number of opportunities, and there's a lot of opportunities here in Morgantown to build upon not only the assets that you have, but to look to the future to develop new opportunities for economic development and to support existing neighborhoods. Next slide. From that growth framework, as you have probably already seen in the comp plan, we established a land management plan, which identifies areas throughout the city to accommodate many of the land uses that Dina discussed as part of the slide referencing complete community. So throughout Morgantown, we identified opportunities that are appropriate for the different land uses to support that big idea of establishing complete communities throughout the city. From there, we also identified 5 focus areas, and these are areas that would be further studied for a small area plan, and they include the Riverfront District, which expands north and south along the Mon River, including the Wharf and Warehouse districts, the Saberton Corridor, which is a major commercial corridor today, but there's some real opportunity, as Dina had mentioned, to make these commercial corridors more mixed in nature so they can support housing and other economic development opportunities. The Lower Greenmont area, revitalization of that neighborhood district just to the east and the southeast of downtown. The 705 corridor in and around the University Medical District is an opportunity area. And then, of course, the heartbeat of Morgantown, which is downtown. And in establishing a complete community, you must also have good critical community infrastructure. And I like what was mentioned in our last discussion about parks and open spaces being a critical infrastructure element of the city. And that's something that we emphasized in the comprehensive plan. And also looking at utility infrastructure, stormwater management. We know there are concerns about the combined stormwater sewer system in the city, for example. So making sure that we have strong, sustainable community infrastructure is very important. Also in the realm of community infrastructure is social services, healthcare, and education. That's so vital to this community. And the city is doing a really good job with moving that forward. The new Hazel House of Hope is a great amenity and resource to the community. So making sure that those resources continue to be available for the citizens of Morgantown is important. And then last but not least, recognizing arts and cultural amenities as part of that community infrastructure is something that was emphasized in the comprehensive plan as well. turn it back over to Dina.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Let's talk a little bit about public meeting number 2. On Thursday, August 10th, from 5:30 to 7:30, we had our second large public meeting. And we had about 65 or more participants at the meeting. It was a great turnout. It was an open house format that had interactive activities that allowed people to provide feedback on all of the displays that were shown, that allowed people to review the draft comprehensive plan and to provide comments on it. So we had many opportunities for people to mark up the boards, put sticky comments on the boards, etc. And this was really the first time that people had an opportunity to review the draft document and to give us comment on it. Let's talk a bit about what we heard. So, something dropped. First of all, we heard a lot about truck traffic. I'm sure that's no surprise. And we heard that it was a serious problem to people and that it was a regional issue, not just a city issue, and that the city will require regional collaboration in order to solve or address this problem. Second, that we heard that the revitalization and evaluation of existing infrastructure should be prioritized over creating new infrastructure. The third was that there needs to be an increase in walkability, bikeability, and transit access in and around Morgantown. And this is something that we have been hearing for the entire length of this project, and I know people are very passionate about it. Interestingly enough, the highest priority, the most favored priority, was given to minimizing truck traffic impacts in the downtown, while improving the district's ability to provide for bicycle and pedestrians. Ron, do you want to talk about number 2?
So kind of building upon that, we heard comments for the land management component of the comprehensive plan. Natural resources were certainly at the top of mind, including preservation of those critical resources here in the city, improving key corridors while engaging stakeholders, recognizing the need for more small businesses. There was a lot of interest in expanding small business opportunities in the city, while also providing multimodal access along those key corridors. Looking to historic preservation, recognize that there may be some opportunity in improving the zoning in the community to help preserve critical resources in the city. And then for land management, there was 2 kind of favored priorities from the public, which again, many people agreed with the idea of establishing complete communities throughout the city that are architecturally coordinated and connected. And then also updating the zoning code, recognizing that there is a connection between land use and zoning, which was very important that people recognize that and favor that as a priority in the plan. Transportation, which you've heard us talk a lot about. Transportation impacts nearly every element in the comprehensive plan. And here at the top of the list is truck traffic. Here again, there was some interest in maybe even considering the relocation of the barge loading site, if that's possible, near Seneca Village, as an opportunity to maybe improve that truck traffic issue. General mobility, making it safer for people to move around outside of a car in the city was something that was very important to people. And then also improving downtown, having a more defined main street in the community that supports walking and biking is something that was very important to the community. And then the most favored priority here was multimodal transportation options, making sure that we have safe infrastructure such as sidewalks and bike lanes for people to use throughout the city. The environment, again, was top of mind. There was an emphasis and interest in stormwater management, making sure that that gets improved moving into the future, protecting those critical resources, trees and open space, green space through the city. And then also even more of a broader kind of environmental sustainability principle is to reduce the carbon footprint of the city through development of more green infrastructure and exploring green alternative energy resources in the community. And then one of the most favored, the favorite priority for the environmental element was to protect the tree canopy and green spaces throughout the community. Neighborhoods and housing. Again, here you see truck traffic. There was a lot of comments received regarding truck traffic along key corridors, particularly Brockway Avenue and Willie Street. We heard that come up quite a bit. There was a lot of interest in home ownership and protecting affordability within the community, and that could include increasing the missing middle housing supply in the community, which diversifies the types of housing that people can afford within the community, and also holding landlords accountable and enforcing codes and ordinances related to dilapidated structures in the community was something that was top of mind. And then the most favorite priority here was to address that truck traffic through neighborhoods in downtown. Community facilities and services, there was a lot of interest in celebrating and amplifying the community library and broadening even further the resources and programming it provides to support the community. Investing in sustainable programming such as recycling infrastructure and community gardens, perhaps utilizing underutilized land for some of those agricultural opportunities, and then providing resources for the youth and mental health and other addiction crises that is impacting not only this community but the region. So making sure that we have the resources in hand to address those issues. And it also ended up being a favored priority of the community, social services. And then last but not least, economic development, supporting small businesses. There was certainly a lot of interest in making sure that we have opportunities for small businesses to thrive in the community, supporting kind of the future of employment, the remote workers, making sure that we create opportunities here. This isn't a place where people want to live and move to, so how can we support remote workers who can live anywhere? Why can't they live here in Morgantown? So support that to add to the economic development of the city. Again, celebrating downtown and also addressing the unhoused population in a compassionate manner. And the most favored priority here was to support and attract small local businesses, which we heard as a significant theme. So just a few updates that we've done. We met with you back in July, and we took what we heard from our conversation, what we heard from the public, to make some critical updates to the comprehensive plan, in which we refined strategies and sub-strategies based on your and the public review. We updated the land management plan. There were a few areas that we refined the designations of the different land uses, and we also refined some of the definitions to make them a bit more clear in some areas. We updated various graphics in the report, made little editorial changes, and then we also developed the implementation strategies and plan priorities, which you have seen in the latest version of the comprehensive plan. So just to touch on some of the implementation priorities, implementation is important. Now that we have this visionary plan, how do we get it all done? And we've gone through the plan and developed the implementation strategies. And these are some key priorities for each of the sections. Just to kind of quickly go through some highlights of each. Truck traffic, making sure that we continue to work with the MMMPO and the county to develop strategies to address that issue is something that will be important. establishing downtown as a local and regional live, work, play destination, creating walkable, compact, transit accessible development patterns, not only here, but working with area communities to make sure that we have coordinated land uses as much as possible, working to protect natural resources, and building and emphasizing recreational opportunities, which people love here in the community and would love to see those opportunities expanded, building a strong regional workforce, and then all of these opportunities would be possible through continued coordination with the county, neighboring municipalities, and the MMMPO. Next. Land management is very important, how the community revitalizes and preserves over the next 20 years. Some key elements and priorities of that is to develop the downtown master plan and then design guidelines for the downtown, complete communities, going with that theme to make sure that we are having development that's architecturally coordinated, and that ties in with the design guideline opportunity, continuing the public art initiatives that's happening in downtown. It's adding a lot of vibrancy, and the community residents really appreciate that. So continuing that and funding that program, continuing to coordinate with WVU, which is a major institutional stakeholder in the community, to understand their master plan and the development plan so that we can have unified development patterns throughout the city with that institution. Updating the zoning code so that it matches the aspirations of the land use plan, and very similar to the regional vision, protecting natural resources and cultural resources throughout the city. And then transportation, limiting truck traffic through the city, again, working with the MMMPO to understand what those opportunities may be, creating complete streets and gateway corridors that create welcoming environments for visitors and the residents of the community so that we can have opportunities for people to get out of their car and walk and bike. Utilizing the PRT, it's a very special element here in the city that many other communities do not have. So beginning to work with WVU and celebrating that resource as a placemaking asset and a unique transportation resource is something that should be prioritized. Looking to transportation technologies such as electric vehicles, making sure that we have the infrastructure to support those uses, and improving multimodal infrastructure throughout the city. And then in the environment, again, addressing stormwater management concerns, protecting the green space and tree canopy of the community, and making sure that our development standards meet that goal. Looking to electric vehicles and other green infrastructure to make sure that we are being forward-thinking in that realm. And also working towards developing the North and South Green Belts, which is a major regional and local big idea that certainly has a lot of promise to improving bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, not only from Morgantown, but to the county as well. Neighborhood housing, again, truck traffic, improving the corridors through the residential areas of Morgantown, making sure that we have a nice mix of housing types that are affordable and have pathways to home ownership for residents who would like to own a home. Reinvesting in existing neighborhoods, and also making sure that we're enforcing codes, particularly as it relates to aesthetics of residential areas while increasing tenants' rights. Community facilities and services, increasing access to parks, open space, and trail networks, making sure that we have a strong public safety department, addressing the addiction crisis and houseless population throughout the city, maximizing the public library as a community resource, building upon the sustainable resources within the city, and making sure that we have the resources to support social services. And again, you guys are doing a really good job with the Hazel House of Hopes and other resources that you offer today. And then last but not least, economic development. And each of the Opportunities that I mentioned before that certainly feeds into economic development as well, but these are some key economic development priorities. Strengthening the brand of the city, particularly its neighborhoods and districts. Boosting the sense of place through public art, and you are doing a really good job with that through your public art program. Increase in mixed-use development opportunities. This not only create places for people to live, work, and shop, but it also leads to more jobs in the community. Supporting and attracting small local businesses downtown. Pursuing public-private opportunities with the university. Again, the university is a major institutional user and entity here in the city, so making sure that we maximize those opportunities to work together would be something that should certainly be a priority. Supporting remote work and integrating them into the community, and expanding the airport flight offerings for commercial and industrial use. So with that, we will go into the final segment just to give an update to the next steps. We have our City Council Committee of the Whole presentation next week on Tuesday. I'll be back down for that to give a presentation to the Committee of the Whole. October 3rd will be the first reading of the comprehensive plan, and then November 8th will be the second reading of the comprehensive plan for adoption. So with that concludes our presentation. I'll turn it over to you for any questions, comments that you may have.
I have a couple. First of all, it's a beautiful document. Thank you for the work. A couple terms I wasn't familiar with. What is a Greenpoint plan? It's in the regional vision section.
Yeah, the green print plan. So that's a plan.
Green print plan. I'm sorry, I apologize. Green print plan?
Yes. So that's a plan that establishes a vision for green infrastructure throughout the community, whether that's reducing the carbon footprint, expanding the tree canopy, et cetera. So it creates a set of guiding strategies and opportunities to expand green infrastructure in the community.
Sounds like a worthwhile plan. Is this something we do now, Ricky, or is that?
I think this is kind of bringing it all together.
So we're committing to doing that?
Yeah.
Correct.
We being the planning commission, is that how that would
Or
work?
a partnership with the land reuse agency, potentially. Absolutely.
Another term that I'm not familiar with, the Gateway Wayfinding Master Plan. Is that something that we have in the works, or is that similar to the green print plan?
Yes,
A commitment.
Funds have been set aside to start looking at a master plan about how to build those districts out, the branding around them, and then how to connect everything so that whether you live here locally or more you're out of town, you can get to where you need to go more easily.
So this is a more regional effort. It would include Mountaineer Country, CVB, and
They would certainly be a stakeholder for sure.
yeah. Okay. The document talks about zoning classifications based on intensity. Could you talk about what that means? I want to make sure I'm clear on what that means.
Yeah.
Form and intensity, I think, is the term that you use.
We'll go back up to that one slide.
And while you're looking for that, as an aside, I mean, I see the comments and understand people think the zoning code needs changed, but I mean, other than parking, I'm not sure. Well, first of all, the inverse is true. In the future, after this is enacted, we can't change the zoning code unless it's consistent with the plan, absent some extraordinary circumstance. But I really don't think our zoning code is far from the plan. In fact, I think supports the plan in most of these cases. Would you agree, Ricky?
Yeah, I think to Dina's comments earlier, I think there's some, especially in some of the focus areas, there's opportunities to tweak the zoning code to maybe allow for a more mix of uses that wouldn't be permitted right now, right? And especially when you look at the corridor mixed use. So again,
Yeah.
and I mentioned it several times, we're nearly built out. We're not going to be able to annex property. So what are we going to do with the existing surface parking lots, underutilized sites, brownfield sites? We need to start looking at those as opportunities to where we can naturally increase and develop, as opposed to looking at greenfields outside the city. In the zoning, updating that would encourage that.
So will you do that scrub and come back to us with those changes, or how's that going to
Yeah,
work?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, so the question was about form and intensity, zoning classifications based on form and intensity. Could you talk about that a little bit, how that works?
Yeah,
How that would work?
so right now you have more of a Euclidean zoning, which defines the use and also the parameters around size, scale, bulk, parking, et cetera.
That's the definition of Euclidean zoning.
That's right. That's
Okay,
right. So that
okay.
kind of goes into what we were saying for as a recommendation, maybe moving towards a hybrid where you integrate more of a form-based code, where that looks more at the form rather than so much as the use. So making sure
Tell me
you
what
get-
form means. I'm not sure. I
Oh
understand.
yes. So like the height, scale, setbacks, step backs, and
You
the
have a sketch that is actually a form-based illustration. I think a drawing on one of your sheets that may help you describe it.
well, I was going to say, so the form.
Going with the.
Can you go back up to, well, I don't.
So
know what you were
that
talking
suggests a more subjective regulation as opposed to objective criteria. Is that what we're talking about here?
about. No, it'll have some very, like it will establish height, it'll establish front setbacks. What we're trying to get at is making sure that we have development patterns that create the livable communities that we're aspiring for. So making sure the buildings are located close to the street and the parking in the rear and the sides of the buildings, integrating parks and open spaces, particularly in mixed-use development, et cetera, et cetera. So making sure that the form is right to meet the goals of the recommendations of the future land use map. Well, this image here is just showing different types of housing. It's not necessarily form-based code, but we can make sure that the intent of the different types of uses that we're proposing can be implemented in a way to promote the walkable communities, et cetera, that we're proposing as part of the plan. So a lot of that goes to the form, the height, the position of development, again, being close to the street, parking in the rear, et cetera. So that would be established as part of that kind of form-based element. That makes sense.
And the relative relationship between the buildings in terms
Yes,
of height
yes.
and
Yeah,
setback
that's right, yeah.
and all of that.
So, and I'm glad you put this slide up because I want to make sure I'm clear. What are we talking about with middle housing? Is that a density parameter?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a term that's kind of come out over the last 5 years or so that we've been using. The missing middle. Usually in communities we have two extremes. You have the single family homes, and then you have large mid-rise, high-rise buildings that could have apartments or condos. And traditional neighborhood patterns, if you look back to the 1900s or so, you can see a lot of that still represented here in Morgantown. You'll have more diversity in the housing types: duplexes, fourplexes, bungalow courts, townhomes, etc. So when we say increased missing middle, what we're trying to achieve here is to make sure that we have a diversity of housing types within the community, not just single family, not just apartments, but that we can have duplexes and triplexes and townhomes and row homes and things of that nature.
Which is where our young families and young professionals are going,
Yes.
right? 30 years ago it was trailers. Now it's these middle housings.
That's right. They're usually smaller footprint,
Yeah.
use less land, they're more
Big
affordable.
missing piece of our housing market.
Exactly. That's why they call it the missing middle. Exactly.
And it
Thank you.
allows a greater opportunity for housing than if you just had single family and then a few larger apartment buildings.
Yeah.
Changing the subject, one thing I thought, first of all, I'm voting certainly to endorse the plan and forward it to City Council with that endorsement. But one thing I think we missed, particularly in the land management piece, is the slope easements, is the geography of the town. I think the challenge is that the undeveloped land now are the slopes, which our stormwater ordinances will allow building on a slope as long as, at least for now, we can contain the water. But we know that's not a long-term solution. So I really, and I'm not suggesting an amendment, it's done, and it's a terrific piece of work. But I mostly want to put that in Ricky's ear and see what we can do about better protecting those slopes. You know what I'm talking about. Like,
Yes,
for
sure.
instance, on White Avenue, if you drive out White Avenue and just look up the hill, you know, that's what I'm talking about.
Sir?
Down the hill where the road usually goes.
Where the road used to be, yeah. So, I guess we could just drill into that in more detail later, but I don't want to lose that point. Nor do I want to lose the point of, you're going to scrub this, and over the next year or two, we're going to have on the agenda code amendments to conform to the new comprehensive plan. And then
The
finally,
next steps, yes.
how do we make sure, I think the implementation piece is terrific, and that's so important. How do we make sure this is gonna work? I mean, is this the planning commission's job to every so often, if it isn't, maybe it should be, every so often come back to this and look maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years. I don't know what the frequency would be, but,
Yeah, so the plan recommends that at least, I think, once a year that we meet and discuss where we are in the scheme of things. And I think previously, this body did that, at least once a year, looked at. And if not, looking at Mr. Petros, I definitely think we should.
yeah, I don't
Right.
recall doing that.
Okay.
So, the last comprehensive plan, we did that for the first 2 or 3 years because we had the study areas, remember those?
Oh, yeah.
And then we would talk about those occasionally. What are we
People
gonna do
brought
with
up
this?
issues.
Yeah, what are we gonna do with these? And the answer was, we don't know, and wait till next year, and then that just sort of fell off. We stopped doing it.
Well, I really think that would be helpful, especially when it comes to budgeting season and working with council to establish budgets for the year. If the commission says, here's what we want after we've met and looked at the plan, this is what our next priority is gonna be, then we need to ask council for the resources to do that if it requires that. So I would be definitely an advocate to at least meet once a year, maybe even twice a year, to just look at what's going on holistically across the city based on that plan, and then say, okay, did our priorities change? Or maybe we need to get more back on track. in
Well,
terms of what
that'll
the-
take some staff work on your part, but that's a
Yes, sir.
terrific idea. If we could do that twice a year, just to touch base, to make sure this is a useful plan, not just an attractive plan.
And then the other component, if I may, is that, even though by state code we're required updated every 10 years, it doesn't mean we can reevaluate more quickly than that, every 5 years. I think that's becoming a trend in communities where they're actually looking at it because of the way technology is changing, especially in transport. It's like, how do we keep up with it? Well, we need to look at our plans more frequently than every 10 years. Although I'm glad the state of West Virginia does have a requirement that we need to update it every 10 years. That's good.
Yeah, we work with quite a few communities in updating their plan every 5 years because, to your point, Ricky, things change so rapidly. Technology, even thinking about COVID, how that impacted communities so much. So we typically do that or recommend that as well.
Last comment, thank you for the time. I thought I'd seen some demographic projections in an earlier draft. Did I miss those in here? Are they in here somewhere?
Yeah, they should be
Yes, sir. Yeah.
in the regional.
Okay,
vision
all right,
section.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's on page 21 of the comp plan.
If I may expand on it a little bit, I think something that I think the plan tries to address a little bit is based on, the way things are now in current projections, the share of population growth in the county will far exceed what's going on in the city, right? And that's for a lot of different reasons, right? But there's an opportunity to maybe change that trajectory a bit if there was more redevelopment in the city, more utilization of underutilized sites, and thinking more creatively and working with our business and development community to think a little more outside the box in terms of what's possible in some of those areas. And that can start to change the trajectory. I think, Morgantown let me see here real quick, is expected to change in population by 2040 by maybe 2,000 people, less than that. And if you look at the county, we're looking at 10,000+ people. And so again, looking at this in a larger context, right? If more and more people are having to live outside of the city limits, moving to Fairmont and other places, and nothing against those communities, it creates more traffic, it creates more transportation, it creates more issues and stress on our infrastructure. So how can we?
The missing piece in my mind is always, how much land do 10,000 people take up? I mean,
How do you visualize that?
No, really.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure you guys have seen this. I mean, assume new development of virgin land. how much land did 10,000 people take up? There's our case for infill development. But, you know, Ricky, it has to be a metro approach. We're not going to be able to do the missing middle in Morgantown. It's going to have to be in Westover and Granville and in the county, right? I mean, it says it here, we're built out.
Yeah.
And unless we can get developers to do infill, and you know they don't like it, that's where we're at.
It's a challenge, right?
And I guess the last thing, the truck traffic is not going to get better until we have a governor that gives a crap about urban life. You know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You know, until the DOH gets an order. We lost. I don't know if you know, we lost the case. The city lost the case in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Where we tried to parse the statute and didn't talk about the effects this has on people's lives. People who live in those neighborhoods now have to deal with a booming truck at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Supreme
The
Court doesn't
Greenwood-
give a shit.
The
I'll tell you
Greenwood
what.
neighborhood I recently met with, along with Bill Austin of the MMMPO, they had a very specific meeting about trucks, and they're reinvigorated to go back. We're now looking at Route 7 is a federally funded road, and it may not be meeting federal funding guidelines, and
What happens when that?
So
yeah.
glad that you guys
We're-
are on that.
we're on it again.
I guarantee you,
We're not
Counselor-
above shaming the trucker contractors and Greer.
Well, and the court, frankly. If those trucks were driving through the South Hills of Charleston, I bet that case would have turned out different.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
No doubt about it.
Well, and does it create, we're looking at, like, that's a HUD or a CDBG community, like, those trucks are impacting low-income individuals unfairly, you know, so we're trying to find a few different methods of approaching it right now.
I hadn't thought about that. It's a great point. The environmental justice aspect of this
Yeah.
is an important point. Thank you for that.
And even if that's not possible, or changing and moving off to where we're reducing the traffic or minimizing it, but like looking at the built environment, how can we, from a development perspective, maybe encourage, you know, like along Brockway towards where Kingwood and Brockway is, if there's redevelopment in that area potentially, naturally our codes are going to say it's going to be oriented towards Brockway, right? Which has a whole bunch of things that you well, what if it was actually, let's move it towards Pennsylvania? Let's reorient the face of the building potentially towards the front, towards Pennsylvania Avenue, and kind of retrofit the buildings, redevelopment that would protect, buffer, whatever word you want to use, from the continuing truck traffic. So not being able to, you know. If
That would be regulating based on form and intensity, wouldn't it?
Yeah, see, there we go. That's right. Exactly. See,
I'm trying to
the
connect
position and
There
the
we
form.
go.
Yep.
I'm ready for the quiz.
So, yeah, anyway. But we need to be proactive with those things, because, you know, to Mr. Strenka's point, if it's not going to change, we've got to we've got to do something, because otherwise those areas will continue to have insurmountable challenges, so.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll go down the line here. I don't have as much, but I agree with everything you said, actually.
Wow, wait a minute.
How about that? Right,
Put
that's
this on my
everything
calendar.
last time. No, but thank you. Wonderful plan. I really applaud you for how much you drilled in and got to know Morgantown,
Yep.
and then made it happen on the plan here. The only thing that I want to bring up is kind of gets back to the land management pieces here, and thinking about, is this the time that we really look closely about where we're drawing the lines for commercial districts versus neighborhoods and things like that? Because I'm seeing some colors on here, I think I can make them out right, but I'm not sure, and ones that we've talked about before. And, you know, particularly as we talk about zone 2 versus 3, let's say, you know, in certain areas. You know, and I can bring up specific examples, and maybe, you know, I don't know if we have to live with this exactly as the lines are drawn going forward.
Yes, we've had many conversations about that, and I'd like Dina and Ron to talk about that,
Okay.
if you can.
Yeah. So I think your question was whether or not, you know, this future land use map, the zoning, the future zoning updates needs to match the future land use map. Was that your question, or?
I guess, you know, there's some kind of fine lines sometimes between neighborhoods and commercial areas, particularly in certain pieces of the city. And, you know, for instance, I'll pick on it because I can't pick it out here, like at Hopecrest. I can't figure out where it's at on the map. Maybe someone from South Park here can figure it out. And so it looks to me like that's all type 2 there. You know, versus I'm looking and thinking of the houses that are up there on like Lebanon Street and places like that. I mean, I can't imagine multi-family use buildings up in that area. It's probably the most expensive area in Morgantown. You know, as far as the quality or whatever, the yard, the size of the yards and the prices of the houses and things. And so, I mean, you could point out other areas here, but I'm just worried that we're not drilling down real closely. You know, kind of flip that down to the other area, down in the Suncrest area, where 705, whatever, Van Voris, you have that commercial area, and right behind it's the dark brown area, which says residential type 1. Well, those are all pretty much R1 area to me, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, are we changing something on here? Is this what it currently is? And do we need to look closely about those particular areas if we're kind of, this is it, we're buying into this? And
Yeah. And
so that's the only thing
No, I think that's a very valid comment to make, and we go through that with all of these land management plans, is how generalized you be versus how precise you are with the land management. You know, land management represents a general vision for the area, and we know we can't capture, every nuances. There's a lot of nuances within the community that we would, have to go through and pick and take, but it's intended to be more generalized, and then, using this as a general guide for the update of the zoning would be what would be the next step. And in that zoning update, you would really get down into these districts and really dissect them and pick up all of the nuances. For example, we just finished the comprehensive plan update for the city of Charlottesville, Virginia. And immediately after we finished the comp plan, we moved into the zoning code update, where we took the future land use map, used a general guide, but really got into the districts and the sub-districts of that zoning map and refined that. So just keep in mind, this is more of a general vision, but then that zoning update piece will really be where you get into the weeds to really refine the district lines.
And like recent ones we've had in Suncrest, and we clipped out things in the plan, and we look at those and we say, okay, this is what the plan says, and that's why we're going to use this biblically.
Right, I think that's going to require staff to be
like that. Yeah, very nice. Biblically.
It's going to require staff to provide some more interpretation, right? Especially on some, but even with the plan that was completed in 2013, there were areas where, you could go back and say that shouldn't have been that color.
And I'm fine, as long as we kind of understand that this isn't precise. This isn't.
I think like some of the things that we're very cognizant of based on recent, conversations is like, for instance, the last plan looked at having more intense development north of Chestnut along Van Voris. That's been slimmed back for lots of different reasons. The downtown area and north where Frat Hill is, there's been some potential rezoning classifications. We were very cognizant of that. And then a lot of the things that we heard, and I think the team did a really great job in terms of what is identified as medium intensity and high intensity residential, is allowing for those accessory commercial uses that a lot, especially the folks in the Greenmont neighborhood have talked about, allow that to give it some more, what's the word I'm looking for, more ability to kind of percolate and come to fruition in terms of maybe of a zoning overlay or a complete rezone of some of those neighborhoods to allow those types of developments to happen, which I think is an improvement. But also I think the team took a really good job about saying, okay, we don't want necessarily a coffee shop on every corner in every neighborhood. That's not what we're looking at. Maybe where it's already existing or where it makes sense to along a major traveled path. So I think when you get in those descriptions, you kind of see the nuances
that's right.
that RHI put together. And I think they did a good job as best as we could to outline that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of the concerns that I had. I appreciated that you moved from high intensity residential to type 1, type 2, type 3, because that has changed since my initial view of the plan. So it's a little less jarring to people when they see but high intensity is next to me now. So,
You're right.
But no, the actual, I'm with Bill. I had some concerns about, where the line between colors are, but if that's something that we're going to address further in like small changes, nuances in zoning.
And we can come back and amend it.
Then,
Yeah, that's right.
then I am good.
Okay.
I have been to every public meeting. I have been to.
Yes.
They have received plenty of my feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
My consideration to this plan, which, by the way, I'd like to compliment you on and recognize my other members for their wonderful observations, is you recognize the realities of the Morgantown metropolitan area. I look forward to seeing what kind of changes we do to do the adaptions. And I stand foursquare on the protection of the neighborhoods. And that's about it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Anybody have anything else?
If I may, just to expand on that, I'd be remiss, and I'm sorry I didn't say it beforehand, but this was a collaborative effort. I know other communities got further, they got across the finish line getting their plan done before ours, but this was a collaboration with the MMPO for their long-range transportation update, as well as the county's comprehensive plan update. So a lot of the data gathering and economic, looking at the numbers and trends, as you mentioned, Mr. Blosser, that was shared between all of those different parties. And so we had on many times, we had folks, other consultants and other team members participating on our calls, and we did the same thing. So I just want to recognize that that was a great collaborative effort that was carried on from the 2013 plan to here, and I'm glad you mentioned it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone have anything else? Okay.
You're gonna take public comment?
I am.
Is there-
Anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of us recommending this comprehensive plan to city council?
Good evening. My name is Jim Coates, and I currently serve as chair of the Morgantown Green Team. And the Green Team has spent a fair amount of time reviewing this draft plan. I appreciate the invitation to send comments in earlier, and I wish we'd gotten it together earlier than this, but we did finally wrap those up late last night. I have a final signed copy that you may want to look at it.
Thank you, sir.
Rather than get into a lot of the details, we identified about 10 areas that we think there should be some additional suggestions. I would start by saying that the Green Team is very supportive of virtually every element in this plan, and we commend you for a very good job. Where we have concerns are in some of the areas where the goals are pretty much vague aspirations rather than having a specific target or standard or benchmark. The discussion just now about the lines on the maps, which areas are zoned what, indicates that some of these specifics are very firmly defined, but many others are still pretty vague. And so the extent to which the Planning Commission and the city as a whole is bound by this plan is something that really needs to be defined more clearly. A key issue, and there are a number of things that we've talked about, but 3 or 4 areas that we had real concerns about, probably the most important of which deals with the ongoing climate crisis. We certainly appreciate the need, as outlined in the plan, to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases and promote renewable energy sources and so on. But given how quickly the climate crisis is advancing, we need to be much more specific than that. As one example, page 32 talks about a green print plan. Green print. Sounds like a great idea, but it doesn't really have any specifics as to what is in that. We talked about tree canopy cover. And there are a wide variety of environmental benefits that come from having tree canopies. It deals with carbon sequestration. It also deals with reducing air pollution generally. It enhances the aesthetics of the city. It helps with stormwater management, just to name a few. We ran across a document from 2017 that identified Morgantown as currently exhibiting 37% of its area covered in tree canopy. And expanding that is a worthy goal. How much is enough? I teach a couple of courses in environmental protection at WVU, and I am constantly nagging the students to be more specific. What is it going to take to satisfy you? When are you done? What is the goal? If we're currently at 37%, is 37.1 enough? Or do you need more? I offer as an example, the city of Pittsburgh set a goal of 60% tree canopy cover by the year 2030, 2032 actually. And I think that Morgantown should establish something similar to that in its comprehensive plan. 37% probably is not enough to achieve all the things that we need.
Excuse me.
We see tree planting as a very useful step forward. Protecting existing large trees is even more important. We think the priority areas for that tree planting should be riparian zones and steeper slopes that are susceptible to soil erosion, etc. We also recommend that tree planting emphasize parking lots and sidewalks to help reduce the urban heat island effect. If you go out in summertime and there's one tree in a parking lot, every car is under that tree, no matter how far they have to walk. Adding more trees would make those parking lots more amenable to people who want to park there, as well as provide real benefits in terms of reducing urban heat islands and sequestering carbon and doing many other benefits. Another criterion, the green print has goals of habitat protection. Doesn't really mention biodiversity protection per se, and we think that there should be some statement that promotes biodiversity, especially protection of wildflowers, pollinator habitat, other key ecological indicators, wetlands, and areas that have higher plant diversity. A statement promoting biodiversity as a goal would be a very useful addition. Probably our most important issue dealing with the climate change deals with the general goal on pages 114 to 119, recommendation E3, mitigate climate change impacts. This is an area where we need specific benchmarks, targets, standards, etc. City Council adopted in December a resolution adopting the Biden administration's goal of a 52% reduction in greenhouse gas levels by 2030 from the 2005 emissions level. That is a clear standard. We can measure that. We can decide whether we're on our way or whether we're just doing incremental not enough-isms. Those are not necessarily radical or extremist goals. That simply says that Morgantown will do our share in addressing the climate crisis. And we think that those types of things really need to be in there. The Green Team discussed at length the recommendation on page 119 to formalize the Green Team as an appointed body by the City Council. And I'll pass this on to City Council. We're not really taking a position on that one. We've discussed it at length over the years. The Green Team serves council and the city manager to provide those recommendations, and the form that you think this board should take is pretty much up to the city council and the city manager, and we'll try to adapt and serve as the best we can. We didn't see a lot of advantages or disadvantages to that one way or another. There are pros and cons, but we'll let that go for now. Finally, the recommendation under CFS 3, dealing with recycling and solid waste efforts. Council has frequently gotten complaints about the garbage pickup and the failure to pick up recycling. And we certainly think that special attention to that goal and setting some clear standards and priorities as to how to address that would be useful. Some of those options need to be specified more clearly. So overall, we do think it's been a great success, but it really does need some standards, some targets, some goals, something specific. How much is enough? When are we done? How do we declare victory? I like victory parties. Let's figure out how we've achieved that. And if we've got that in the plan, then I think we're well on our way to achieving what many of us are trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? You don't leave yet.
Question?
So, I think I brought this up one of our early meetings. I love trees. I agree with you that, they provide so many beneficial effects to the environment. But we're sitting in a city with a gas-fired power plant right in the middle of it. But you haven't mentioned that. What are you guys feeling on this? And is there any opportunity for us to make at least a statement in the plan? I get it, we can't do a whole lot about it, but, it's, we're missing the elephant that's sitting right there on the table.
I certainly share that. I have had that feeling for 30 years now. We recognize that there are limits to the authority of City Council, and we wanted to focus on what's achievable. And that is within the authority of the city to regulate, and certainly mandating solar panels is not something that council can do on the private sector, but funding solar panels on municipal building would be. Requiring the university to shift their energy supply would require action at the state level. I know that the university is exploring the idea of geothermal. I don't know if that's going to pan out or not. We would certainly like to see the university do a lot more in that regard. In other venues, I'm working with a group that is really trying to promote the university to finally get some solar panels. To my knowledge, there is one solar panel at the university. It's at the WVU Organic Farm, and it helps to power some of our greenhouses. And it seems really disappointing that an institution the size of WVU still hasn't gotten solar panels anywhere on campus.
And I'm not saying we want to force anyone to do anything, but we could be an advocate for helping them with, maybe the state level or even the national level, get something done, get resources in so we can get something different in place. But,
and we would certainly support those efforts. We're right behind that 100%.
But we've ignored it in this plan. We haven't talked about it at all. So,
to the extent that the city is able to establish some kind of standards on its own and can further promote both energy efficiency and renewable energy sources in the private sector, residential and commercial areas, those would be steps in that right direction. From my reading of the code, we can't really force the university to do anything as a city.
But I'm not saying force, I'm saying be an advocate.
We can
say
certainly
we will be a
advocate.
partner and support you getting monies or you getting something to change this process.
And that would certainly be a worthwhile addition. We would support that, yes. I know that the university's contract with that steam plant is up in 2027 or something like that. And that will present a really great opportunity to do something about it. Interesting, we're on a little bit of a tangent, but you brought it up, so you opened the door. And the university, when they were still burning coal, generating electricity at the MEA plant, the university got its heat from the waste heat that was left over from that. When MEA shut down, stopped burning coal, was acquired by Vicinity, they now have some gas boilers in there, they're not using any waste heat anymore. And so from the standpoint of greenhouse gas emissions, that may actually be a net increase in our emissions at the university rather than a step in the right direction. And I haven't really done a life cycle analysis on the total emissions, but if I do the math and I look at it, I think that is a problem. And I agree, we need to be doing something about that at that end as well. Anything we can do to encourage the university to be more climate friendly would be a step in the right direction. Are there any other questions I can help with? Comments? Thank you very much. I appreciate the work on the plan. Do more.
Anyone else who'd like to speak in favor for forwarding this to City Council? Anyone who'd like to speak in opposition?
I would say John Whitmore, 349 Grandview Avenue. It's only opposition because in terms of the plan document, it's too long, way too much. Yeah, people aren't gonna read that. I am concerned with certain aspects of the plan. You all don't get to control council or the administration, what they're actually gonna fund. While I love the idea of having form-based code, there is no guarantee that that's gonna happen. And with the plan as it's written, it is pretty high density development that would be allowed in what's predominantly detached single family dwelling neighborhoods. I understand they're discussing a missing middle. If you look into the data that's presented in the plan document, it's a little misleading because you're looking at demographics that are showing all the cities are gonna have declining populations by 2040, but yet somehow the state's gonna have more people. Even utilizing these numbers then, if we're gonna go with them as being correct, you're showing about 1,500 more residents by 2040. Based on your household size of 2.4, you're looking at about 625 units. Data also shows you have about, 2,500 vacant units. There's a mismatch. There's an easy solution. Get those vacant units into production, get somebody living in them, and get them up to code. The plan, it's too, I want to say watered down, and I don't want that to come off negatively against the staff or anybody, but it's too open-ended for a developer to really exploit some loopholes. In particular, when we're talking about triplexes, quadplexes, I think of like Frank Scafella, like coming back and yelling at me for certain things. When you start increasing the density, where you know there's going to be bad actors and they're just going to be shoving kids into housing that's going to kill them. That's what's going to happen when we just do it willy-nilly. You have to have these form-based code. You have to have something that's actually going to enforce it and implement it. And I just don't see our administration having the capacity to do that. Especially when we look at the real opportunity that's completely missed in this plan of lower Woodburn. There was a great opportunity to really design a community, and it didn't happen. And I appreciate y'all's work, but you all are really expensive. And for other West Virginia communities to even imagine this type of planning work, it's not happening. The expectation has to be on staff. There have to be more people that are actually going to be, I don't like this term boots on the ground, but actually having people that are gonna be fielding more community meetings. The level that the citizenry here demands, it says West Virginia, the mindset here is more Northern Virginia in terms of the community services expectation and the ability to pay for those services is present. I wish there had been more, I guess, utilizing this for the chance it is. But yeah, definitely recommend looking at that data because I'm not sure how that went to decision making, but like 625 units, that sounds like a lot. That works out to about like 40 some a year. I mean, that's really not that many. And when you consider we're gonna be knocking down like 50 some housing units, not even mentioned in the plan. There was a real opportunity there, but I don't know, maybe one thing you can do to make this move forward, and if you wanted to explore those, is definitely looking at an addendum process. Going, not necessarily small area plans, but just making sure that you're, as a board, checking on what you're getting. Because who was it? Dave Bruffy. He once said, "Imagine all these meetings happening at the Coliseum. All those empty seats. That's everyone that lives in the city of Morgantown behind me is empty right now. There aren't that many. Two of us. There's not that many people here tonight. That's discouraging. So, Just wanted to get all that out. Thank you all. I would still probably recommend voting for it, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition?
I just want to underline a point John makes. If you don't know, he used to be on planning staff here, and he's now in Clarksburg doing the same thing. Is the implementation piece is the critical piece, and the details are in the implementation, as they can be, if this commission agrees to take on that role.
Well, and also for the sake of Mr. Whitmore, please don't think that I ignored the Lower Richwood redevelopment, because I've brought that up at multiple of our meetings and how it was really not represented within this plan. So I'm with MAP and everyone else trying to make sure that we are paying attention to that and what goes in there and what type of zoning we're moving towards, because I do think that that's an opportunity and also a concern about what could happen there.
And I do think we should give our thanks to the Green Team. This is a terrific report, and it's so good to be on paper that we can read it and use it. Thank you.
Okay, staff recommendations, please.
Staff would recommend that the comprehensive plan update Morgantown 2033 be approved by the Planning Commission and forwarded to Morgantown City Council for consideration and adoption.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor? That's unanimous. Okay. We got, committee reports. Staff comments.
Just two notes. Obviously, as you're probably aware, our city planner, Rodney Bonner, is no longer with the city. He found another exciting job opportunity and decided to explore that. So we appreciated all his work while he was with us and wish him well in his future endeavors. So right now, I'm the only one in the office right now. So appreciate you guys.
Planning's really gonna be an issue.
Appreciate your patience and cooperation. Our next planning commission meeting is scheduled for the 12th, and we will have at least one item of business. What form it takes, but is to be determined. But we will probably have at least one item of business on October 12th.
I will not be here. I will be gone.
Okay.
Is that Rick our quorum?
Yep.
I
I'll be in California, man.
he can't. Well, we can have a conversation about that. I believe there is an application for a new member to be appointed that City Council will be reviewing, hopefully sometime in the near future. And so hopefully we'll have another member on our board here in short order. So.
Well, and that's what I was gonna ask for the good of the commission. When is city council going to fill?
It's been we've talked to some folks and you know they either live outside the city limits or time commitments, and so yeah.
Okay.
And actually, Mr. Blosser and I had a conversation about this earlier as well. But you know, we're doing the best that we can.
Mr. Schuman's not interested in being reappointed?
He's being reviewed now by administration.
City Council is interviewing a person for 7th Ward Planning Commission on next Tuesday.
Yes.
They would not have the opportunity to be appointed at that meeting. They could be appointed at the first October meeting, which could get them on in time.
Plus,
Yeah.
plus the 12th is my anniversary, so even if I was in town, be hard pressed.
You need to. All right, so we'll need to work with that and the applicant then
Yeah.
as well. Okay. And that's all I have, sir.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the commission?
Move to adjourn?
Okay.